Hi everyone, Bryony here and welcome to Gear Tips Wednesdays. Now, as I said last week, I'm going to be doing a small series of these videos. I'm talking about some of the gear that you might need when you're doing overnight or multi-day hiking. So today we're talking sleep systems. Now, sleep systems includes everything that you're going to need to keep you warm and comfortable while you're inside your shelter sleeping for the night. So to get started, let's start with the base layer, and that is sleeping mats. Two important functions. Firstly, and most importantly, is to keep you warm, because if you slept on the cold hard ground without anything protecting you from it, that would take a lot of your heat just sucking straight out into the ground. So there's three main types of sleep mat on the market these days. First up, we have foam pads. Now they might look a bit like these. These are a Thermarest Z-Lite, whichever way you like to say it. Or sometimes you also see the sort of old blue closed cell foam ones that you can roll up into a roll. Now, foam pads, fantastic for keeping you warm. However, they're really not the most comfortable option. As you can see, they're quite thin, so they don't give you a whole lot of padding. It's not too bad if you're a back sleeper, but if you're a side sleeper, it can be really quite uncomfortable on those hip bones. So my Thermarest Z-Lite spreads out to a full length pad, which is great, particularly for the colder weather. However, what I found when I was doing the Hyson Trail was that often I like to actually fold it sort of in half mostly, so that it still gave me sort of a torso length to work with, but I got double thickness, so it was a little bit more comfortable on the cold rocky ground. It's very lightweight. It's actually on par with my inflatable mattress, which I'll show you a little bit later. However, it is of course very bulky as well. That's as small as you can get it. Next on the list, we have self-inflating mats. Now, these mats are great because you don't have to put a whole lot of effort in to blow them up. You simply open the valve and the air rushes in by itself. This one, as you can see, is only a short length pad. So this sort of covers me from my shoulders to my thighs basically. And that's really cool because it saves a bit of space in your pack. It saves a bit of weight as well, of course. And it gives you insulation and comfort for the important parts. So that's your torso to your hips is really the section that's most important. A lot of people will put their rucksack underneath their feet to keep their feet off of the ground. I sometimes use my rain jacket with some old clothes inside. It works quite well as well. So self-inflating pad, really easy to use, tend to be quite comfortable as well. They can be a little bit thicker than the foam pads. However, they do tend to be the heaviest option, generally speaking. So finally, third option, which is my preferred option, is the inflatable sleeping pads. Now, inflatable sleeping pads generally are the lightest option and also quite often the most comfortable option because they've got some real good width in them as well. So that means if you're a side sleeper, you can sleep on the side and it still protects your hips. Now, the downside with inflatable mats is, first of all, you have to blow them up, though many of them do come with stuff sacks that have integrated pumps in them as well, so that does save a lot of effort. And there's also the risk of punctures, of course, as well. So you have to be a little bit more careful with how you set them up and where you set them up. One other downside with almost all the inflatable mattresses is that when you get them and they're brand new, they're very noisy. I'm not sure if you can tell that on the video. So let's see, if I get onto this one, you can probably hear a lot of crinkling, rustling, and stuff going on. And imagine sharing a tent with somebody who's doing that all night long. However, in my experience, this one is actually a brand new one. This one is my old one, which I've actually cut down into a small size, and I've got to try it out tonight and see whether it holds. But this one is much more quiet because it's been used a lot. So you'll find, although they might be very noisy to start with, they do get a lot quieter with time. Okay, so next up in our sleep system is, of course, our sleeping bag. Now, I showed you a little bit about my two sleeping bags last week, so I won't go over that again. But in terms of sleeping bags that you'll find, there's two main types that you can get. One is down sleeping bags and the other ones are synthetics. So the benefits of down sleeping bags, which are what I prefer, even though they're really big, when you use them, they can pack down really small, and that can also make them really lightweight as well. The more it puffs up and the fluffier and loftier it is, the warmer it's going to be. So really good warmth to weight ratio. Now the other option for sleeping bags is the synthetic bags, and they don't have as good warmth to weight ratio. However, it doesn't matter if they get wet. So the problem with down sleeping bags is if they get really wet, they lose their ability to keep you warm. As long as you're careful and you keep your down bag dry, you're going to have no problems. But if you are someone who is likely to get their sleeping bag wet at any time, then perhaps a synthetic option is a better option for you. So it's also really important to make sure you keep your sleeping bag clean while you're using it, because during the night time, your sleeping bag will start to accumulate the sweat, the oils, the dirt that you might have on your skin or on your clothing. And that eventually works its way into the interior of the bag, and then once again, it becomes less effective over time. So the best way to keep your sleeping bag clean is by using a sleeping bag liner. The benefits of a sleeping bag liner is that they also add a huge amount of warmth to your overall system. So this one is a silk liner, but you can also get synthetic thermal liners as well, and they can add anything from a couple of degrees warmth to 10 to 15 degrees warmth to your sleeping bag. So they make a huge difference, and I would highly recommend them. Silk in particular packs down to really small size. It's really nice to sleep in, plus it adds a great amount of warmth as well. Now, we're not quite finished there. As I said from the start, sleeping systems are also all about comfort. This here is my pillow. Now, this is a luxury item. Many people say that it's just an extravagance and you don't really need one. But I can't sleep without my pillow. I think this is wonderful. It weighs 50 grams. I put a buff just over the top of it, which works as a pillowcase, which helps to keep it clean. It makes for a much more comfortable night's sleep, and I think that's the most important thing. All right, now before we finish up, the other part of our sleep system is what else can we do to help keep us warm if it really starts to get cold at night. That also includes what we wear. So at night time, I think it's always good when you're doing multi-day or overnight hiking to keep with you a set of thermal underwear. So a pair of woolen long johns, a long sleeve woolen shirt is always good, and a pair of warm dry socks that you keep just for nighttime wear. So you keep them clean, you keep them dry, and they're always there at the end of a cold day. I'd also recommend a beanie or a buff for your head, because you really will notice a lot of heat gets lost out of your head when you're sleeping cold in a tent. And in case it's really cold, you can always go super trendy and get yourself a down hood. I know it looks ridiculous, but it's so incredibly warm. If you're really cold, you can also use your down jacket, either laying it across the top of your sleeping bag or wearing it inside it as well. But just remember that if you compress it too much, if you have too many clothes on top of it and it squashes it, it loses its capability to keep you warm, and therefore there's not much point. So make sure you keep it fluffed up, either outside the sleeping bag or just loosely on you inside the sleeping bag. Finally, the very last thing is if the temperature drops well below what you're expecting and you're really getting cold, it's always good to make sure you have an emergency blanket or emergency bivy bag with you. This one is one from SOL, and basically it's the same as an emergency blanket. It has that really reflective material on the inside, but instead of just being a single sheet, it's structured as a bag. I'm not going to unwrap this now because it was a pain to put back into its bag. It was a night that I actually woke up in Tasmania to half a foot of snow, which was quite surprising. And I was the only one who'd managed to pull off a half decent night's sleep because I took this out at about midnight. Put this inside my sleeping bag but outside of my silk liner. And the reason for that is that this thing is completely waterproof, so that all the sweat and condensation that you produce during the night stays inside of this. So it does get kind of clammy and a little bit gross. Using the silk liner inside of it does soften it a little bit, and that helps to absorb some of the moisture and make it somewhat more comfortable. But I keep this inside my down bag because I don't want all that moisture getting into the down of my sleeping bag and being locked in there. It's incredibly warm. I've only ever managed to get it up to about my waist because otherwise it's too hot. But it's a really useful thing to keep in a pack, A, for emergencies, but also just for nights when it gets much colder than expected. So I always add that to my sleep system as well. And there you have it. That there is my complete sleep system. So we've got the sleeping mat, sleeping bag liner, pillow, clothing, including sexy headwear, and emergency blanket. If you have that, you'll have as good a night's sleep as you possibly can. Once again, if you've got any questions or comments, add them below, and I'll see you next week.